Hello everybody, welcome back to another light novel review. Today I am talking about volume number 1 of Ishio Yamagata's light novel series, Rokka Braves of the Six Flowers. Now in this story we have a world that is under threat of an evil god. This happens every couple of generations, and when the evil god awakens from its slumber, the goddess of fate summons 6 braves to go and face the evil god and subdue it back so that it sleeps again for how many ever hundreds of years. There are always 6. However, this time, when the braves assemble to face the dark god, they find that there's 7. Either something monumental has happened to change everything, or, more likely, one of them is a traitor. Now, to me, if you take Rokka, it is like Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash and the mystery light novel Zaregoto had a baby. This is a pure fantasy novel. There's no isekai type elements, but that sort of pure fantasy, little bit of grittiness, it kind of reminded me in tone of Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash. It really wasn't a humorous type story. It's certainly not like Konosuba even a little bit. In fact, it's not even on the comedy level that we get of Danmachi. It's more like Grimgar in terms of its tone. It's a more serious type fantasy. But it merges that with, in this volume at least, a locked room mystery with 7 suspects. Now, for reasons of spoilers that I won't tell you, there's at least one character that we're pretty positive is not the guilty party. But other than that, this book, I think, really works because we have 6 very viable suspects. In general, to me, I found this book really engaging. Like, I had a hard time putting this one down. I read it in a much shorter time span, I would say, than typically it would take me for a light novel. And that was because, first of all, it felt a bit different combining these, a very classic sort of mystery trope, the whole locked room mystery, but then merging it with that action and intensity of fantasy. So you don't have those sort of lulling moments that you do in a lot of mysteries and such. Everything feels just amped up that bit more in terms of the tension, because it isn't just about the characters figuring out who's guilty and then everybody goes home. No, these people are not only fighting for their own lives, but fighting for the survival of their entire world. So the stakes are incredibly high for them not only to solve this mystery personally, but also just for the world in general. Add into the fact that you can have all of this action and, magic being used and all this sort of those elements added into it, and the book moves at a great pace. The other thing that really makes this book work for me is 7 great characters. They all are very unique. They even have unique speech patterns that they're easy to follow. Even without any speech tags, you could almost tell exactly who's speaking just because of the language they use, because of the inflections. I will give credit to Yen on this one. I can't imagine it was probably easy to, well, they probably had to think quite a ways ahead of time in terms of how they were going to translate each character and write their dialogue, because, as I said, each character's dialogue is very different. The way that it's sort of paced, the word usage, it makes them all very unique. There's not, even the characters that I would say verge on your tropey archetypal type characters, they really have elements to them that set them apart. For instance, I found it really interesting, the character of Adlet. Now, he's arguably the main character, and he's constantly saying, I'm the strongest man in the world. And at first, I really thought this is a character who is your standard tropey main character, anime, light novel, manga main character who is an idiot. He is clueless. He thinks that he is a lot better than he actually is. And he just keeps getting through everything by luck and by the efforts of his far more talented teammates. But Adlet's very surprising and is a lot more intelligent than you kind of give him credit for initially. And when I came to sort of the end of the book and he was, the whole strong, and sort of looked back on his referencing himself as the strongest man in the world, it almost seemed more melancholy than it did egotistical. And that's sort of a perfect example, I'd say, of this character that started off in my mind one way and then I ended up thinking about him differently by the time I got to the end of the book. And I would say that's true for the vast majority of the characters. The other thing about making a great mystery is making sure that, especially in a locked room where you've got sort of a set cast, is making sure that every single one of them is a plausible suspect, because otherwise it just becomes really easy. I won't say that you won't nail down who the culprit is right from the beginning. You might, but what I think is really good about this book and shows some excellent thought is that every time I settled on a suspect and I was like, I am convinced that this is the person who did it, something would come along that would sort of throw me a curveball and would make me doubt myself. So even though I may have been kind of like, okay, I think this is the person, and I had lots of good reasons and everything else, most of them, brought with me because of all the other books that I've read, I would have doubts eventually because things would happen in the book that would make me question and think, oh, well, then it really can't be who I was thinking it was because of this, that, or the next thing. And at one point, I even did think, I was like, this, the party who ends up being the person, I even thought to myself, I thought, that's who it is. Like, not, I would say early-ish, I thought. But then there was stuff that happened that made me go, oh, no, maybe not. And so it was still a surprise, even though I had suspected that person. It was still a surprise when I got to the end and there's that big sort of reveal. The other thing, if I really had any one complaint about the book, it would be that the guilty person's motivations, they just didn't seem strong enough. I don't think we knew enough of that character's backstory to really justify their actions. And I'm hoping that that gets explored more in the future novels, but I guess we'll see. But what I can say is that Rokka was filled with 7 unique characters. Some of them, like, I ended up liking all of them. I ended up finding things to like about all of them, but they were all flawed as well. Like, none of them are perfect. None of them are OP in a ridiculous way. They all have weaknesses. They all have strengths. They all have character flaws, and they all have redeeming factors of their character as well, which makes them, again, like I said, very interesting, but also is why you keep guessing about just who is this person that's the traitor, because it could be any of these people. So it's a really well-formed mystery. The way that it's done is very cool and makes excellent use of the fantasy setting. I'm really trying not to spoil too much about this. But all in all, Rokka, really, really engaging book. Like I said, it pulled me in. I couldn't put it down. And I found myself becoming increasingly invested in the characters as it went through. And there were even points where I would suspect a character and then hope it wasn't them because I liked them and I didn't want them to be the bad guy. So really highly recommend this one. I know some of you have probably seen the anime, and funny enough, the anime is only based off of this first novel. So that kind of gives you a hint about just how much of this book is important. It isn't like something where, oh, well, there's a throwaway chapter here or a throwaway scene here. No, like, in terms of unraveling the mystery and everything else, pretty much everything is important in this book. There isn't a lot of waste in any way whatsoever. So, yeah, I mean, they did a whole anime, I think it was, 13 episodes? all on just the one book. So if you were wondering, if you've watched the anime and you're wondering, how many books do I have to jump in to find out the rest of the story? It's only this one. So, and I would still recommend reading it. I've watched the first 2 episodes of the anime so far. I started watching it as soon as I had finished the book, and there are differences, and I wouldn't necessarily say that I think they're differences in a good way. I'm glad that I walked into the book knowing pretty much nothing. I think that helped a lot. So, if you have not seen the anime, I would say read the book. Don't watch the anime yet. Read the book, get the full experience here, and then watch the anime later. Or don't watch the anime and just read the series, because based on how this one ends, I am like super stoked to see what happens in book number 2, because it just looks like the whole mystery aspect of this is just going to keep on going. And yeah, so highly recommend Rokka. It was one of the few that I didn't even give it just a blanket 3 or 4 stars. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. Really, really enjoyed this one. Highly recommend it. I would say that this is probably my favorite light novel I have read this year, if not in my top 5 of like all-time volume number ones of light novels. I liked it that much. So those are my thoughts on volume number 1 of Rokka Braves of the Six Flowers. So for my next review, I'm actually going to switch over to catching up on a series that I've been reading ongoing, and that is going to be volume number 6 of The Devil is a Part-Timer. I've really enjoyed this series. I know a few of you have kind of said that it gets a little draggy, or that, the momentum doesn't seem to kind of keep up at the same levels as we get into later volumes, but definitely I really enjoyed this series, and actually it feels like a long time since I read volume number 5, so my next review will be on volume number 6 of The Devil is a Part-Timer. If you enjoy what I do here, if you like this video, give it a like, because that's always really appreciated. If you're brand new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe so you can check out my future light novel reviews, including The Devil is a Part-Timer volume number 6. If you want to check out my old reviews, I've got a link to that as well. Thank you so much for joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.